It was the sound that woke him up first. Not the gentle rooster crow that fans of Little People Big World have associated with Roloff Farms for decades, but the bone-chilling, metal-on-metal screech of heavy industrial machinery. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. The Oregon mist was still clinging to the pumpkin patches, creating a ghostly gray veil over the property. But what was happening behind that fog wasn't a scene for a family reality show. It was a scene of absolute destruction. It was the ultimate symbol of the Roloff family empire, the massive, custom-built pirate ship where the kids grew up, where birthdays were celebrated, and where millions of viewers watched a family dream become a reality. But at 7 this morning, that dream didn't just fade away. It violently ended. Today, we are taking you inside the dawn demolition, where reports state that Matt Roloff, trapped in his bathrobe and completely blindsided, could only scream helplessly as a steel claw crushed his life's work into splinters. We are peeling back the layers of what we believe to be the most heartbreaking morning in the history of the farm, revealing the chaos that the cameras weren't rolling to catch. Before we dive into the wreckage and expose the documents that might explain why this tragedy happened, I need you to take a second right now to hit that like button. If you have ever felt a connection to this farm or the memories built here, show your support. And if you want to stay ahead of the mainstream news with the deep dives and theories they are too afraid to touch, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss the updates we have coming on this situation. Now, to understand the magnitude of this morning's disaster, we have to go back 48 hours. While the public was being fed a narrative about a simple property transition or a downsizing effort, insider theories suggest something much darker and far more urgent was taking place behind the scenes. We are hearing whispers about a brutal bankruptcy auction. This wasn't a standard estate sale where fans could come and bid on a souvenir. This has all the hallmarks of a court-ordered liquidation with a terrifyingly strict timeline. According to sources close to the situation, the terms of this auction were absolute. Everything had to go. But here's the catch that led to this morning's nightmare. The buyers weren't sentimental fans. They weren't museum curators looking to preserve the Roloff legacy. The winning bidders for the large-scale structures, specifically the iconic pirate ship and the western town facades, were allegedly commercial scrap salvage companies. These aren't people who care about the episodes you watched 10 years ago. These are people who look at the pirate ship and don't see childhood memories. They see tonnage. They see raw redwood. They see steel bolts. They see profit margins. And the most critical detail that nobody is talking about is the clause in the contract known as the 48-hour vacate order. From the moment the gavel came down, the buyers had exactly 2 days to clear the land. If the structures weren't removed by the deadline, they would forfeit their purchase. This created a high-pressure ticking clock that eliminated any chance of a careful, respectful disassembly. There was no time to unscrew the planks. There was no time to preserve the craftsmanship that Matt put his heart and soul into. The salvage crew arrived this morning with a mandate to clear the lot by any means necessary. We have to talk about the atmosphere on the farm leading up to this moment. Imagine the sun just barely cresting over the hills. The farm is silent, or it should be. But instead, these massive flatbed trucks and a colossal demolition crane are idling at the perimeter. Security feeds and leaked images suggest that Matt was inside the big house, likely assuming that the removal process would be a week-long, careful operation. He is a builder, after all. He understands construction. He knows that to move a structure like the pirate ship, you usually need permits, a disassembly crew, and a crane to lift it in sections. He likely went to sleep thinking he had time to say goodbye. He probably thought he would be out there with his clipboard, directing the crew, making sure they didn't damage the hull, treating the ship like the piece of art he believes it to be. But the reality of a salvage contract is brutal. When you sell something for scrap, you lose the right to dictate how it is removed. The crew that showed up this morning wasn't there to relocate a pirate ship. They were there to harvest wood. And the fastest way to harvest wood from a complex structure isn't to take it apart. It's to knock it down. The disconnect between what Matt Roloff expected and what was legally about to happen is the tragedy at the center of this story. It is the clash between the sentimental value of a father's masterpiece and the cold, hard efficiency of industrial liquidation. We are receiving reports that the crew didn't even knock on the door. They didn't check in with the main house. They had their work order, they had the gate codes, and they had a deadline that was rapidly approaching. They drove that massive excavator right through the wet mud, tearing up the grass that Matt has spent years manicuring, and parked it directly alongside the pirate ship. The operator didn't pause to admire the view. He didn't take a moment to reflect on the cultural significance of the structure. He simply engaged the hydraulics. The sound of that engine revving up was the signal that the era was over. It was the sound that traveled through the walls of the big house, shaking the windows and jolting Matt Roloff from his sleep. You have to put yourself in his shoes for a moment. You wake up to the sound of heavy equipment. You look out the window, expecting perhaps a landscaping crew or a delivery truck. Instead, you see a mechanical beast towering over your proudest creation. You see the claw opening, hovering like a predator over the deck of the ship. And in that split second, the confusion turns to panic. This is why the reports of him running out in his bathrobe are so credible and so heartbreaking. There was no time to get dressed. There was no time to put on the TV-ready face. This was a man reacting on pure instinct, realizing that the legacy he built was about to be executed right on his front lawn. The setup for this disaster was perfect in the most terrible way. The auction terms were too aggressive, the buyers were too detached, and the communication was clearly non-existent. It was a perfect storm designed to wipe the slate clean, erasing the physical history of the show in a matter of hours. As we move into the actual events of the demolition, remember that this wasn't just wood breaking. This was the shattering of the illusion that the farm would last forever. The Dawn demolition wasn't a renovation project. It was an erasure. And Matt was about to find out that no amount of shouting could stop a signed contract and a falling steel claw. The air on the farm changed the moment the clock struck 7:15. If the initial engine rev was the warning shot, what happened next was the declaration of war. We have spoken to demolition experts who have analyzed the leaked footage of the site, and they all agree on one chilling detail. The crane operator did not hesitate. In a normal salvage operation, you would see a crew of guys with crowbars and power drills carefully removing the fixtures, maybe taking down the pirate flag, or unscrewing the ship's wheel. That is what Matt Roloff would have expected. That is the builder's code. You respect the materials, you respect the construction. But the scrap dealers who bought this lot for pennies on the dollar didn't care about the TLC memories or the structural integrity of a playset. They cared about volume. They were on a 48-hour clock, and every second they spent unscrewing a bolt was money lost. The moment the demolition cranes swung into position, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to horror. The operator manipulated the controls, and that massive steel claw, covered in rust and grease, lunged forward. It didn't aim for the top to take it down gently. It aimed right for the midsection of the hull. This was the twist that nobody saw coming, certainly not Matt. The claw slammed into the side of the pirate ship with a sickening crunch that sounded like bones breaking. This wasn't just wood snapping. It was the sound of 20 years of history being pulverized in a microsecond. The custom siding, the hand-painted details, the carefully treated lumber, it all exploded outward in a shower of splinters and dust. And that is when the doors of the big house flew open. Witnesses describe a scene that is hard to watch, but impossible to look away from. Matt Roloff burst onto the porch, not in his work gear, not with his crutches strapped and ready, but in a bathrobe. It was a moment of raw, unedited vulnerability. There were no cameras to capture a retake. There was no producer to tell him to wait for the lighting to be right. He saw the claw retracting for a second hit, pulling a massive chunk of the ship's ribcage with it, and he lost it. Sources say you could hear him screaming over the roar of the diesel engine. He wasn't just yelling to stop. He was yelling about the materials. He was screaming, "Stop! You have to take it apart piece by piece. That's redwood. That is genuine redwood." This specific detail is heartbreaking because it gives us a glimpse into Matt's mind. Even as his world was crashing down, he was thinking like a builder. He knows the value of that wood. He knows that you can't buy redwood like that anymore without spending a fortune. To him, the pirate ship was a bank vault of precious materials. To the crane operator, it was just obstacle number one. The disconnect was violent. Matt was shouting about value and legacy, while the machine was speaking the language of brute force. The operator inside the cab likely couldn't even hear him. These machines are soundproofed. The radio was probably on, and the engine noise is deafening. To the operator, the man waving his arms on the porch was just background noise, a speck in the distance that had no authority over the work order. Matt realized that screaming from the porch wasn't working. The crane was swinging back for a third hit, aiming for the captain's quarters. This is where the situation descended into pure chaos. Matt, still in his bathrobe, made the desperate decision to try and physically intervene. He grabbed his crutches and moved toward the stairs. But the Oregon weather had conspired against him. It had been raining for days. The path from the big house to the play area wasn't a paved walkway. It was a slurry of thick, clay-heavy mud. For an average person, it would be a messy jog. For Matt, with his mobility challenges, it was an impossible gauntlet. He hit the bottom of the stairs and immediately began to struggle. The crutch tips sank deep into the soft earth. Every step was a battle. He was moving as fast as he could, his bathrobe trailing in the mud, shouting, waving his arms, trying to get the attention of the ground crew. "Hey, turn it off! You're destroying it!" But the ground crew was on the other side of the ship, focused on the debris field. They were wearing ear protection. They were focused on safety zones. They weren't looking at the house. This brings us to the climax of the morning, a sequence of events that feels almost scripted in its tragedy, yet it was all too real. Matt was about halfway to the ship, stuck in the mud, breathing heavily, realizing he wasn't going to make it in time. He stopped. He had to stop. And he was forced to watch the finale from 50 yards away, helpless. The crane operator decided it was time to bring down the main mast. This was the centerpiece of the ship. It was the tall, proud spire that you could see from the road, the part of the ship that made it look real. The steel claw reached up high into the gray sky and clamped around the base of the mast. There was a pause, a moment where the wood resisted. You could see the entire ship groan and twist, fighting back against the machine. For a second, it looked like the ship might win, like the construction was too solid to break. But then, the hydraulics whined, the operator pulled back, and with a sound like a gunshot, the main mast snapped. It didn't just fall, it shattered. The top half came crashing down, smashing through the deck, obliterating the steering wheel, and collapsing the roof of the lower cabin. The pirate ship, the icon of Roloff Farms, was effectively decapitated. Matt stood there in the mud, silent now. The screaming had stopped because there was nothing left to save. The ship was a pile of jagged lumber. But the true twist, the revelation that turns this from a sad story into a family mystery, happened moments later. As the dust settled, a site foreman finally noticed Matt. He walked over, clipboard in hand, stepping easily through the mud in his heavy work boots, highlighting the physical disparity between them. Matt, furious and shaking, reportedly demanded to see the paperwork. He wanted to know who authorized a smash-and-grab demolition instead of a salvage operation. He wanted to know why they were treating his masterpiece like garbage. The foreman didn't argue, he didn't apologize, he simply flipped to the second page of the work order and held it up. According to exclusive leaks from sources who have seen the permit, the signature at the bottom of the demolition authorization wasn't a bank official. It wasn't a court-appointed trustee. The signature, legally authorizing the immediate and total removal of the structures by any means necessary, was Amy Roloff. The realization must have hit Matt harder than the sight of the crushed ship. This wasn't just a business transaction gone wrong. This was permission granted by the one person who knew exactly what that ship meant. Amy, the landowner, had signed off on the permits. She had checked the box for standard removal, which in industry terms means demolition, rather than checking the box for preservation disassembly, which costs more and takes longer. Matt was standing in the mud, staring at his ex-wife's signature, realizing that while he was sleeping, she had legally cleared the way for the bulldozers. The crane engine idled down, the job largely done, leaving Matt alone in the rain with the wreckage of the past and a piece of paper that changed everything. Matt turned away from the wreckage, his shoulders slumped, the rain soaking through the thin fabric of his bathrobe. There was no point in standing there any longer. The mast was gone, the hull was breached, the dream was dead. But as he made the slow, painful trek back up the muddy hill to the sanctuary of the big house, the nightmare on the farm was only shifting gears. The salvage crew wasn't finished. The contract, the one signed with that devastatingly precise signature, called for a complete clearing of the lot. The crane, having finished its meal on the pirate ship, rotated its massive turret. The operator didn't take a break. He didn't stop to survey the damage. He swung the boom 180 degrees and locked his sights on the next target, the western town. If the destruction of the pirate ship was a tragedy of lost craftsmanship, the demolition of the western town was a shocking reveal of reality versus illusion. Fans remember the western town as a sprawling, immersive playground, a place where the Roloff kids played sheriff and outlaw, a backdrop for countless interviews and pumpkin season photos. It looked solid. It looked permanent. But as the steel claw reached out and hooked onto the roof of the saloon, we learned the truth about reality television architecture. When the machine pulled back, the building didn't collapse with the heavy thud of a real structure. It peeled away like a layer of old wallpaper. The entire front face of the western town, the bank, the jail, the hotel, came away in one flimsy sheet. Behind those painted fronts, there was nothing but rotted 2x4s and empty air. It was a jarring visual metaphor for the state of the family itself. On the outside, everything had been painted to look sturdy and functional, but the moment pressure was applied, the facade ripped away to reveal that the foundation had rotted out years ago. The crane tore through the town with terrifying speed. Because it wasn't a real town but a set, it offered zero resistance. The sound changed from the crunching of heavy redwood to the snapping of thin plywood. In less than 20 minutes, the entire street, the setting of 1,000 childhood memories, was reduced to a flat pile of splintered debris. By 8:30 in the morning, the noise finally stopped. The heavy diesel engines idled down and then cut off. The sudden silence was louder than the crashing timber. Where the pirate ship had stood proud against the skyline, there was now a gaping hole in the horizon. Where the western town had invited guests to imagine a different time, there was only a scar of brown mud and twisted metal. The transformation was absolute. The theme park version of Roloff Farms was dead. In its place was just a wet, gray field in Oregon, stripped of its magic and stripped of its history. The fallout from this morning is going to ripple through the community and the fan base for years. We have to circle back to that document, the permit that allowed this to happen. Why did Amy Roloff sign off on a demolition order rather than a preservation order? We have been digging into the county records and cross-referencing with the state law practices, and two theories have emerged. The first is the cold logic of business. Preserving the pirate ship, taking it apart bolt by bolt to sell or relocate, would have cost tens of thousands of dollars in labor. Demolishing it cost a fraction of that. If Amy was looking at the bottom line, if she was trying to maximize the profit from the land sale or simply stop the bleeding of cash, she made the financially prudent choice. She chose the wallet over the heart. But there is a second, darker theory circulating among insiders. This is the scorched earth theory. There is a belief that as long as those structures stood, the ship that Matt built, the town that Matt designed, his ghost would always haunt that land. Even if he didn't own it, his presence was stamped into the landscape. By signing the order to crush them, by physically obliterating the physical manifestations of Matt's creative ego, Amy wasn't just clearing land, she was exercising the property. She was wiping the slate clean so that whoever comes next, or whatever she decides to do with the land, it starts from zero. It was a way of saying that the era of Matt Roloff as the ringmaster of this circus is officially, legally, and physically over. Matt watched the final truck get loaded from his window. We can only imagine what was going through his head as he saw the pieces of the pirate ship, jagged and broken, being tossed into the back of a dumpster like common trash. He didn't come back out. The blinds on the big house stayed drawn. The salvage crew packed up their gear, secured the gate, and drove away, leaving deep tire tracks in the mud that will likely fill with rain and freeze over in the coming days. The images we have described today paint a picture of an ending far more brutal than anything TLC would ever air. They want you to believe in the gentle transition, the amicable divorce, the happily ever after. But the truth is, a crane smashing a pirate ship at dawn while a man in a bathrobe screams into the void. It is a harsh, heartbreaking reality check. The Roloff Farms we knew are gone. It didn't fade away, it was crushed. Now, I need to hear from you. This is the question that is going to divide the fan base. I want you to go into the comment section right now and tell me your verdict. Was Amy Roloff cruel to sign those demolition permits, knowing how much that ship meant to Matt and the history of the family? Or was she justified? Was she simply a woman trying to clear the clutter of a painful past and make a smart business decision? Is this an act of spite or an act of liberation? Do not sit on the fence with this one. I want to see Team Amy or Team Matt in the comments. Let's get the debate started. And listen, if you want to see the leaked photos of the aftermath, if you want to see the document with the signature yourself, we are working on verifying the images for our next video. You cannot miss that. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have hit that bell icon so you get the notification the second we go live with the evidence. The farm is quiet now, but the story is just getting started. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the wreckage.